Good afternoon. My name is Jim Ogsberry. I'm the Executive Director of the Western Governors Association. It's an association that represents the governors of the 19 westernmost states and 3 Pacific territories. And we are fiercely bipartisan, and we are so delighted that you're able to join us today here in beautiful Santa Fe. It's my pleasure to welcome you here for the second workshop in a series of workshops under the Reimagining the Rural West initiative of our chair, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. The WGA policy effort derives a lot of its energy from these initiatives. These initiatives have become a big deal in the recent years. And if all we did with these initiatives were to assemble experts and have big conversations and share best practices and profiled case studies and synthesized policy options, that would be probably a pretty worthwhile use of our time. But the governors are really focused on action. They're focused on making things happen. And the results from these initiatives have really been astonishing. So, for example, our most recent, our immediate past chairman, Governor David Ige of Hawaii, launched the Biosecurity and Invasive Species Initiative. The number of work products, deliverables that have issued from that have really been remarkable. We're standing up now the Western Invasive Species Council. We've developed new occurrence data collection protocols. We're about to launch a new data mobilization campaign for invasive species. Governor Steve Bullock of Montana, his initiative was the Western Governors National Forest and Rangeland Management Initiative. It's going to have positive impacts on the way we manage our public lands for years to come. Now along comes Governor Burgum with possibly our most ambitious initiative to date, Reimagining the Rural West, which is really being pursued around 3 principal pillars: connectivity, community, and opportunity. The governors, the Western governors, are the right group to lead this conversation. And that's because there is no other group of elected officials who, at their level of influence, are on a bipartisan basis developing and pursuing public policy that is as meaningful, as substantive as Western governors are advancing. We had our first workshop in Fargo on October 1st. Preceding that was a launch webinar that was hosted by Governor Burgum. We will have a workshop on December 3rd in Post Falls, Idaho. We will announce at least one other workshop, and we'll have a webinar series. This will all lead to the publication of a report that will be issued in connection with our summer meeting in Medora, North Dakota, June 29th through July 2nd. The issuance of that report will not, however, be the end of this effort. It will just be the end of the beginning, because the recommendations, the themes of that report will inform gubernatorial policy and will guide our work in the rural sustainability space for years to come. So all of these workshops are live streamed and they're archived, and you can view them on our website. And I would invite you to go back and have a look at the Fargo workshop from last month. It was really fascinating, and go back and have a look at Governor Burgum's welcoming speech. He does a fantastic job framing this entire initiative and elaborating on these pillars of connectivity and community and opportunity. And watch Ben Winchester's really gripping keynote address where he is challenging the rural narrative, because it seems that the prevailing narrative about rural communities is pretty negative. You know, they're dying, they're withering on the vine, they're suffering brain drain, the population is shrinking. Well, that's not true. And it's especially not true in the rural West, where rural communities' population is not shrinking, but it's growing. It's not growing as fast as the urban populations, but it's growing nonetheless. So these rural communities are not dying, but they are changing. And they're not in the middle of nowhere, they're in the middle of everywhere. because changes in workforce, changes in technology, changes in job requirements are giving more people the opportunity to base their residence on other considerations than where their job is located, based on considerations like quality of life. And these communities aren't really suffering brain drain either. Sure, there are a lot of disaffected 18-year-olds who are bored and leave town for something exciting, something to do. Now, these are 18-year-olds, they really don't know a lot. Their frontal lobes haven't connected yet. I don't know if that qualifies as a brain drain. But who is moving into the rural communities are people in their 30s and their 40s and their 50s, people who have careers, people who have life experience, people who have skills and capital to bring to their communities. And if those kids leave, that's fine, and especially if they come back with experience and skills and families. In Fargo, we talked about the two big ships that are key ingredients to reimagining the rural West. That's entrepreneurship and leadership. We talked about how states can better empower local leaders to determine what works best in their local communities. We talked quite a bit about the changing nature of economic development. The economic development profession, since time immemorial, seems to have been focused on one thing, and that's creating jobs. Creating jobs. Governor Bergen points out that for the first time in our history, we have more jobs available than we have people pursuing work. So economic development is changing. It's not really just about creating jobs, but it's about creating communities where that are great places to live and work and play, where people want to come and bring their jobs or pursue their careers. We talked about agriculture and the incredible new opportunities in technology that is opening up opportunities in that sector. The high spread of or the spread of high-speed broadband connectivity. We talked about arts and culture and how that can help drive community development, build communities, and how arts and culture can be threaded into economic development strategy. So we're delighted to continue that conversation here in Santa Fe, explore how rural communities can adapt, how they can thrive, how they can capitalize on their natural advantages to become stronger and more prosperous. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the format of this workshop for the next 2 days, and I don't want you to think of this as a conventional conference with a panel and an audience and PowerPoints. Everyone here in this room we regard as a panelist. Everyone in this room has expertise in their fields, everyone has opinions, and there's a reason that we limited the number of attendees to this workshop. It's because we want to create an environment where the entire room is engaged in a conversation. We want to hear your contributions. So don't think of the people on the stage so much as a panelist as a discussion leader. And if you have a question for the panel, that's fine, but maybe you've got an answer to a question that's been posed. And so speak up, or maybe you've got an anecdote or a story or an opinion about the topic at hand. Please speak up and contribute that, because this is going to be a much richer conversation. It's going to be a much richer initiative to the extent we're able to extract that knowledge and those recommendations from you all. And by the way, I've got here with me the sheet of attendees. I just might ask a question of you. I'm not afraid to call you out. So please engage. The one thing that I would caution you is that we are being live streamed, so if you are going to contribute from the table, please wait until a microphone arrives to share your contribution. And I also would be remiss if I did not take a moment to acknowledge the incredible partnership of our sponsors and our partners. I'm pleased to recognize WGA's federal partner in this great effort, the State Exchange on Employment and Disability, SEED, of the U.S. Department of Labor, for their very generous contribution to this entire series. We're so grateful for your partnership. I'd also like to recognize and extend our appreciation to our exclusive initiative sponsors, Western Governors University and Grow with Google. Our signature workshop partners, Share Our Strength and the U.S. Travel Association. And thank you also to Deloitte for your support of this Santa Fe workshop. And WG also recognizes the contributions of our affiliates, America's SBDC and Ann Walker Consulting. So with that, let's get on with the show and move on to our first conversation, rural prosperity, a conversation with the USDA. On April 25th of 2017, President Trump established issued an executive order that established a task force. It's an interagency task force on agriculture and rural prosperity to be chaired by Agricultural Secretary Sonny Perdue. USDA is at the absolute front lines of rural development, administering programs to support not just farmers and ranchers, but rural communities as a whole, through programs targeting things like affordable housing and business development and community facilities. The purpose of that task force was to identify legislative, regulatory, and policy changes to promote agriculture, economic development, job growth, infrastructure improvements, technological innovation, energy security, and quality of life in rural America. That task force undertook a sweeping effort to collect input from rural stakeholders and to coordinate all of the different federal agencies serving rural communities. And so to tell us more about that process, we're joined by Rebeckah Freeman Adcock. Rebeckah is a senior policy advisor to Secretary Perdue and spearheaded that task force on behalf of USDA. No small feat, I assure you. And we're also joined by Art Garcia, the New Mexico State Director for USDA Rural Development, to share a bit with us about how USDA carries out its community and economic development goals. So Rebeckah, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Am I live? Can you hear me? Okay. So it's a great honor to be here, and I kind of relish the opportunity to hear from you guys as much as you hear from us. I think I'm here to set the stage for maybe how the notion of reimagining rural America and bringing prosperity back or maintaining where we have it is an important part of the conversation, both for the President, the Secretary, and now obviously for the Western Governors Association. It is hopefully a distinctly bipartisan effort. It's certainly something that we've seen Congress acknowledge in a bipartisan way in the recent Farm Bill, where they took specifically quoting and referencing the Rural Prosperity Task Force and the findings, and I'm going to kind of briefly take you through in a second, captured that in the most recent Farm Bill and created an actual council that is managed now through our rural development mission area in USDA to memorialize the work and the effort and hopefully continue that regardless of who's in office and what those other competing priorities are. So to give you an idea of where we started on the 25th, which was my second day on the job and the Secretary of Agriculture's first day on the job, a little over almost 2.5 years ago now, we were tasked by the President to lift up rural America, to figure out where things were lagging behind and to figure out where the federal government could do better, not just at USDA, not just at the programs and places where people in rural America felt a connection, but the whole federal government. All the secretaries and principals were expected to be there, and they were expected to designate teams and experts within their capacities in order to build out this program and the findings and recommendations, and to use that as a platform specifically for the federal government, but also acknowledging the partnerships that we would have to have in the places where there was the obvious nexus with the states, local community, and the private sector. And so, we had 180 days to get 28 plus principals around the table on multiple occasions and do all of the in-between work and figure out, first of all, what do we know about rural America? I mean, USDA, we have many missions and research capacities. In particular, the Economic Research Service was very helpful. But we also knew there were other resources. So the task of initially getting those folks around the table, which the Secretary did and led on 3 separate occasions where the principals came together. Some funny anecdotes about that. When you're in the room with a lot of people who are in line to be President of the United States, you have a tendency of of assuming that they're working at such a high level that they are not aware or might not pay attention. And I assure you that is not the case, because on one of the occasions, we all could have sworn that a couple of folks might have been napping while we were doing our presentations to update on them what was going on. And in fact, they were contemplating, because they rolled out with two of the most detailed, specific questions, one that got targeted toward my space and another to another colleague about the findings and the work of the group in between, and whether or not these were things that two other specific agencies could have a larger role in building out plans and opportunities. And it took us both by surprise, because we knew our boss is very detail oriented. Secretary Perdue is very active, and if you hear us ever say, well, that was a secretarial choice, I assure you it was a secretarial choice. Not speaking for the office of the Secretary in general. Not everyone operates like that, but it was very refreshing and good to see the level of engagement and seriousness with which other agencies outside of USDA, outside of your normal spots, were actually engaging on the issue. The path we went along, and we submitted our report on time. I believe it was a Saturday in October. I believe it was the 23rd of October. We hit send to the White House on that report. It was vetted and cleared through all of their channels and certified by the president, and he signed it and announced it in early January at the American Farm Bureau annual meeting in 2018. So it was delivered on time and on schedule, which is how we are very much expected to operate. And since that time, there have been a series of steps that have been taken both at the federal interagency level and now through RD to keep things on track. The White House does many check-ins with us, as well as with other agencies and departments, to ensure that they're keeping rural America on their radar screen, and that as we go, we're looking through the report, which, by the way, if you haven't seen it already, it's extremely easy to access. If you just type in your search engine USDA Rural Prosperity, you will go there almost immediately with very little effort or energy. I believe there may be a link to it in your electronic materials as well. But during that course, we learned a lot about rural America. Some of the things I guess I knew. I am a product of rural America. Most of the people I work with in political circles at USDA are as well. So we had a lot personally vested in what we knew and getting it right, as well as what we wanted to see those places where we came from, which many of us have always pondered however we would make ourselves back, make our way back. What would that look like to either keep our friends and family there, or find out ways for people like us, who are the children of those places, to make it back. And we quickly discovered that the single most important factor in 2017, 18, now 19, in the 21st century is connecting rural America. Some people have compared it to the electrification of rural America in the 20s and 30s. Yes, but maybe even more significant than that, because literally there is no possible way to platform economically, through infrastructure, through quality of life, through all of the other things that I'll hit on very quickly, that the pillar, the foundation, it started out as being one of many, and it quickly, across all of the work groups working on all the issues, it was the number one. And we were like, this deserves its own. So when you look at the report, you'll see it literally as the pillar. And then once we realized all the things that we needed to do there, many of which I think you will talk about here, so I won't steal that thunder. Once you identified e-connectivity as that critical mass, that starting point, that if we don't get this one, we're not going to get the rest of it, of how do you keep rural America prosperous or make it prosperous. And another very important component that I need to come back to very quickly is to remind you that we're not trying to develop rural America with this report. And by that I mean, I don't know, separating rural development out into two separate words. We're not trying to make rural America not rural, because that is, for many of us, most of us and those living in rural America, why they're there. One of the foundational reasons for why they're there, why they're not in a city. But that doesn't mean that they can have a quality of life and access and some features that are enjoyed by people who live in more urbanized or suburbanized areas, and then identifying what that means. It may not mean you have a performing arts center, but it may mean you have an active arts community, for example, in the quality of life section. It might not mean that you have a university or college, but it means that through e-connectivity, perhaps you have better access to being able to do those things remotely. So it's not trying to recreate cities and suburbs in rural America. And that's that was very important for the folks around the table who are developing this point to understand, who were not from rural America. That we're not trying to make the country not the country. The country is the heart and soul of the United States, all the space in between. It's where we believe worthy of preservation, but also worthy of prosperity. So moving on to the additional components that we knew it took to make a community thrive. You have quality of life. That's the infrastructure, that's the housing, that's the access to medical services, decent education, all of those foundational things that even a small community in its own way, through its own vision, should be able to access or figure out through public and or private resources and its own good intentions to figure out how to build those opportunities out. And we want to make sure the federal government isn't getting in the way of ensuring those things. And where are the gaps? We know there are healthcare gaps. We know there are infrastructure gaps. We know there are education gaps. We now know that we have a tremendous aging housing infrastructure that is aging. Some of that is public, much of it is private, but what do we do about that? RD has some opportunities in that space as well. The next one we talked about, and this is going to be a strange one because the way it was captured isn't going to be what you think about, but it's harnessing the rural workforce. I don't know about you, but where I grew up, lots of people, you kind of went into the same program. If you were staying local, you went and you did the same things. I grew up in a coal mining community. A lot of people went in and got a vocational degree in something related to coal mining. They weren't necessarily looking on the horizon of whether that was a long-term sustainable activity, but it was what you did. And what one of the parts of harnessing the rural workforce includes is education, but rural right-sized education. What are the jobs, not just that are there, but the jobs that you want to be there? Is there a particular economy that you want to begin to attract that you believe you're well suited for that could supplement perhaps your existing economy or parts of your economic engines that may be in transition? And that happens in rural America with resource economies, whether it's mining, forestry, agriculture. That's great when those are the heart and soul of the community, but oftentimes those are fluctuating markets and they're changing markets. And so have something secondary there to back you up and get you through those inevitable ebbs and flows of those resource-based markets can be very important. So are you facilitating building that out into your education and your education infrastructure, I guess I would say. Another component of that is what to do about agricultural labor. It's a tremendous pressure and problem on the farm. It's an intersection with immigration, and it's one of those issues that you won't hear about. All the other immigration issues you will hear about talked very aggressively. But reforming and right-sizing the availability of both local and transitional labor for the agricultural community is very important. The second issue, or the third, I think, big bucket there was the opening of minds, and this was hard in Washington, D.C. among very educated people, the opening of the mind that perhaps the world is not captured by a bachelor's degree, and that very smart people do things other than go to college, and that very smart people who do things that other than go to college do very, very well in life, financially, personally, and otherwise. And I think you're starting to see a lot of that conversation, but that conversation is particularly well suited, I think, to rural America. And I think we can be a leader in making that transition and empowering very smart people to do very rewarding and interesting things through routes other than incurring tremendous amounts of debt for a bachelor's degree that may or may not be well suited to what they want to do and how they want to make a living. The next component is technology and innovation. And technology and innovation is everything from, if you ask people in Silicon Valley, it's not on the downslide. It's going to be there for a while. But if you ask them where the next great opportunity is, most of those guys will say, yeah, it's probably in the middle of Kansas and we don't know about it. It's probably, you know, somewhere on the south side of Georgia in some little town we've never even heard about it. That's where the true innovator and technology folks are looking. And if we connect rural America, both for business purposes and for new technology opportunity purposes, you don't have to be in Silicon Valley anymore. Like, the heart and soul of technology and innovation in the United States doesn't now lie on the coast, and it doesn't have to. And so if we can connect rural America, you know, you can have corridors or just even isolated pockets of truly innovative, and I'm talking about outside of agriculture, I'll come back to that one, but truly innovative, technological-based economies and opportunities that reside in rural America if we connect it and if we connect it well. So you don't lose that young brain drain, perhaps, those sorts of jobs that are entertained there. The second place is in agriculture. I don't know how many of y'all know this, and I will not back down. So you know, by training, I am historically an environmental scientist. I will go toe-to-toe all day long with your thoughts and feelings on all of those things if you would like to. I feel very strongly about technology and agriculture. I feel very strongly about feeding the world, the whole world, not just the folks who can afford Whole Foods. And I shop at Whole Foods, so not judging. And I feel very strongly about communicating, as does the secretary, about not fearing your food. Believe it or not, we would not be here, any of us, regardless of your food choices, without enormous leaps in how we grow, how we breed it, where it goes, and how we do it, sustainable or otherwise, with all the buzzwords, all the things. That would not have happened without a tremendous effort and leaps and bounds over the past 150 years. We are doing those things more sophisticatedly, with greater degree of technology, but if you have a cell phone, if you take modern day pharmaceuticals, let me assure you, you can walk straight into your local Walmart and buy anything off the shelf. And so long as it has not been humanly contaminated with something like, I don't know, E. coli, your food is safe. Your food is safe to eat, it is safe to consume, and it is being grown and produced with good, reliable technologies that are building on the historic technologies that you may feel more comfortable with. More on that later if we'd like to talk about it, but we certainly are not going to feed the world in 2050 at the current rate of population growth, which for my purposes, I think is a moral imperative, and share those sorts of technologies both with what we do here, the most productive nation on earth, and what we hope to continue to do, and also share those technologies elsewhere. Off my soapbox. Lastly, economic development. And economic development, or developing the rural economy, excuse me, it's a little bit different. That's everything from accessing and using local resources. That's a big footprint for the federal government. We own a lot in rural America. We manage a lot in rural America, and we've made it very hard for rural America to use and take their own level of community ownership over those things. And that is something we're working very hard to unwind ourselves from where we can, while still maintaining a sustainable opportunities on those lands. It's talking about the classic economic development, the bricks and the mortar, but much more than that as well. And it's also talking about community resiliency and infrastructure. And community resiliency is one of those things that gets a little bit undersold and underserved. It also fits well into quality of life. Y'all may have noticed, but when horrible, tragic natural disasters occur, when they occur in rural America, you get a couple of days of news coverage and some flyovers, whereas when they occur in cities and suburban areas, we're there for a while and we're on the ground. Part of that is the nature of the beast. It's the market for media, but it is also because rural America knows what to do. They know how to bounce back. If there is a great and glowing characteristic that even folks in cities will say, you know, the good old boys and girls and wherever sure knew how to handle that. Here we are, wondering what we're going to do to get our electricity back and where we're going to get our food. That is a great strength of rural America. It's not one we talk about a lot, but it's one that actually I work also for the Secretary in the realm of security and emergency management response now. And there are a lot of lessons learned there that we are trying to push out to our federal partners because it's a success story. It's a proud moment for rural America. Nobody's happy when something bad happens, but nobody handles it better. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. And so thank you for allowing us to take that more broadly to the federal government and try to get those lessons pushed out. I think that is a pretty high level but serious summary of how we got here. And all of those spaces, we did talk. Thank you for the opportunity of talking about this effort about a year ago. And they reconfigured it into the 3 different buckets that fit beautifully in the report. And I'm very excited about seeing what happens.
Great. Thanks, Rebeckah. Let's hear about community development on the ground.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. First of all, welcome to the City Different. When I grew up here, this was rural, and now it's grown tremendously. But let me ask a question. How many of you here have been in a rural development office in your state? Wow. Okay. I love preaching to the choir. But I think that is probably, rural development is an agency within USDA that does exactly what the name says. We have a number of programs that provide benefits for rural communities out within your state. And the way we do that, the way we deliver our programs is we have local offices in rural communities where you can walk in and you can get a home loan. You can get your community started on a water system. You can get anything that would build your community through one of our rural development offices, and there'll be people there that are knowledgeable, subject matter experts, and can help you to get your projects going. And I see some collaborators here that we worked with in the past that we've done some wonderful things. Priscilla, thank you. Let me talk a little bit about what we do at rural development within the framework of this report. First, Rebeckah, I got to tell you a story. When I first became a state director, we had a meeting in DC, an orientation. Mm-hmm. And we were there, we had to be there very early in the morning. Mm-hmm. And I was reimagining my first cup of coffee at that point.
The secretary starts a little early.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm standing outside the secretary's office, and all of a sudden, hey, I know that guy. And these cabinet members were walking past me, and they were energized and spry and full of enthusiasm, and they just come out of one of the meetings with the secretary.
Mm-hmm.
The breakfast meeting with the secretary.
Yes.
So I said, well, I better pick up my game because these guys are really on it.
Yeah.
But we are so pleased to work within the framework of the final product that came out of all this yeoman's work. And so let me give you a little piece. And those of you that have been in a rural development office may, if you want to talk about a project that we've done in your community, please feel free to do so. We would love to hear what's happening in your communities. But just looking, first of all, in e-connectivity. Rebeckah is absolutely right. In this world, you need to be connected. Whether you're a farmer, a businessman in a rural community, or no matter what you do, especially a medical professional. What we have done in New Mexico is we have tried to get opportunities for broadband out into the communities. In Taos, New Mexico, which is just north of here. If you haven't been there, it's wonderful. Go see it. We did a $64 million loan and grant package for them, for the Kit Carson Cooperative up there to enlarge broadband and to grow broadband in central northern New Mexico. Over in Roosevelt County, they had over 600 miles of copper wiring, can you imagine, in this century? And so we were able to provide funding for them to replace with a modern optic fiber. And so these are two examples of how rural development has worked in rural communities with e-connectivity. But I got to tell you my favorite story. We were able to provide funding for equipment at Rehoboth Hospital, right, Ernie? Rehoboth Hospital out in Gallup, New Mexico. And we provided equipment out there for the local physicians to be able to communicate with the University Hospital in Albuquerque. Why did we do that? They did not have a cardiac physician out in Rehoboth, New Mexico. So through telemedicine, we were able to provide the ability for the physicians there to communicate with the physicians in Albuquerque. We provided equipment that could get a patient on a treadmill, and the people in Albuquerque, the doctors in Albuquerque, could read that information. So they got the idea, why don't we get the local politicians, the local officials in the area, and we'll give them a tour of this facility and show them how it works. So they did, and they were walking through, and they said, we need a volunteer to get on the treadmill. Well, some intrepid gentleman gets on the treadmill, they hook him up, and as he's doing his little jogging thing, the physicians in Albuquerque are saying, this gentleman is having a cardiac event. Wow. They loaded him up, got him to Albuquerque, and the next day, he had life-saving bypass surgery. It was amazing. This is the impact that we're having with e-connectivity in rural communities. Some of the areas that I wanted to talk about is quality of life. The core programs that we have in rural development all touch the quality of life. Our housing program provides housing opportunities for individuals who live in rural communities that we find would be 3 times less able to get clean, affordable housing than somebody in an urban area. Comes to mind in Deming, New Mexico, which is in the southern part of our state. Miriam Wheeler is the lady's name. And she is the assistant manager at Burger King. Single mom, 2-year-old son. Through funding through our housing program, she was able to obtain her first home. Our housing programs are more affordable because there's no down payment required, no mortgage insurance to tack on to their payment, and then we have a longer term, so it makes their payment more affordable. Now, for very low income individuals, we have subsidy, try saying that 3 times, subsidy, that allows a greater affordability for these homes, and they're beautiful homes. You can buy an existing home, you can buy a new home. We also have a community facilities program. Now, the question I ask is, what is a community facility? Well, it can be whatever you dream of, what your dream, what your vision is in your rural community. Let me give you a few examples. I'm challenged, I grew up here, but I'm challenged. Pecos is east? Okay, it's the other way. Thank you, Ernie. Anyway, so in Pecos, New Mexico, there's a lot of communities surrounding Pecos that are very isolated, and medical care there was very scarce. But through our community facilities program, we were able to provide $6 million to build a medical center, dental center, to provide critical care and other types of medical care for individuals in that area. So when we started working on this program, I was talking to the physicians in their emergency care area, and I said, tell me, how's this working out for you? Is it doing great? And they said, some of our folks are so isolated that they start having a heart attack or some sort of life-threatening event. They have to be transported from that area to Santa Fe, where we are now, to receive the proper medical care. A lot of those patients did not make it. With this facility, patients have been able to use that facility in Pecos as a stop-off. The physicians there can stabilize them so that they survive the trip into Santa Fe. Well, I said, how many of those have happened in the last 2 months? And they said 7. Wow. So that is a true impact of our community facilities program. Another one, I think, Terry, you might have been with us on this one. Mountain Air, New Mexico, way out there somewhere. Ernie's been there. Mountain Air, New Mexico. They had an ambulance that it was a safety hazard to get in it. If you were sick, you'd say, no, I'm not getting in that thing. Put together with duct tape, high mileage, it was old, it needed to be replaced. Through our community facilities program, we provided them a grant that allowed them to replace their ambulance, not only up to date, it runs, it's safe, but it has all the equipment on there. I think we even did a defibrillator for them. So they didn't even have a defibrillator. And so we were able to buy that vehicle and provide the equipment for that vehicle. So a number of things that we do in our community facilities program that really make a difference. And the community facility can be anything from a library to a civic center to a medical facility to whatever you can dream for your community. And lastly, I'd like to talk about our water and wastewater program. Out here in the West, water is probably more precious than gold. Water is a scarce facility. Growing up here in New Mexico, I know water was a critical thing for us. And so our water wastewater program, recently in the Four Corners, where's Mr. Trujillo? Oh, there he is. In the Four Corners area, over in his area, in Shiprock, New Mexico, we provided a $26 million loan grant package for clean water and wastewater because the system that they had before was outdated and it did not meet EPA standards for effluent. And so all of this bad stuff was going into the San Juan River. If you've ever been into the San Juan River, it's beautiful. It's one of the best places for fly fishing in the whole world. But their system was releasing all of these toxic chemicals into that river. We're able to fix that with our water and wastewater program. A couple of other examples on quality of life is I'm thinking of Mr. Salkin over in Moriarty, who is an 80-some-year-old gentleman, had a well that he had for water source in his home. The well broke, and Mr. Salkin used his life savings, all he had saved up, to fix that well, and they still didn't get the job done. So they were having to haul water to him to have any water at all to live. Through a grant in our housing program, we were able to provide him $7,500 to get the well fixed, and now Mr. Salkin is able to go, like the rest of us, to the tap, turn it on, and he can get water just like the rest of us. Talking about the workforce, oil and gas is critical to the New Mexico economy, as that is probably in many of your states. And so we have a problem in that we have the oil and the gas, but we need workers to extract that. We have had a major problem in keeping up with a place for the workers to live. So we have been working with the lodging industry to provide hotels so that these folks can go out there and work in the oil field and have a place to come home at night and lay their heads down after a hard day's work. One of the other things that I think is really a good example of how rural development helps farmers in agriculture and technology is there's a pecan farm in Roswell, New Mexico, and we provided them $900,000, I think, to go ahead and put 1,500 solar panels on their property. And with this solar energy, they're able to work their pumps for irrigation on their 260-acre farm. They're able to use that energy for their irrigation system. So that's one way that we're able to help with the rural economy. Couple of quick anecdotes here. Talked about the water system. Over here in Okayawingay, which I got you guys on this one, I know that's north. Anyway, we did a loan for them, $15 million I think it was, to replace their water pipes. They started doing the excavation of the water pipes. Guess what their water pipes, their current system was made of? Leather.
Wow. Leather?
They had leather water pipes. So we're a welcome addition to their program. One last project that is really close to my heart. Zuni, New Mexico, Zuni Pueblo. We started out there doing self-help housing through our housing program to provide affordable housing. They're beautiful houses. In this program, it's kind of a take on the old barn raising, where all the community would come together and raise the barn and all would work on it to help each other out. Self-help housing, it's the same kind of deal. There's a group of people that help each other build their house through our program, funded through our program, and it helps them. Well, in that community, we noticed that they had a little old convenience store. When I say old, it was 105 years old. and they didn't have a grocery store, so they would have to drive on a country road 40 to 45 miles to Gallup, New Mexico to feed their families. We were able to fund the Halona Marketplace. Halona in the Zuni language means community center, or the center of the community, I think is what it means. And we were able to provide a beautiful market that could be in the middle of any urban area right now, up to date, high tech. And what I really like about this is we talked about growing local economies. In that market, they have local produce that they grow in the area, and the livestock that they grow in that area provides much of the food that they sell in that community, and they don't have to get on a back road to go and feed their families with nutritious food. So these are just some of the things that we can do at rural development to help a community to reach rural prosperity in America. So if you're reimagining your rural state, you need to be teaming up with us. You need to go see your local offices. You need to meet your state director and just share with them your dreams. I'm curious. Tell me about some projects. Has anybody done a project with rural development? Priscilla, I know you've done a lot. Yeah, tell us about it.
Pam Roy with Farm to Table and the New Mexico Food and Agriculture Policy Council here in New Mexico.
Yeah.
We really appreciate USDA Rural Development. We provided as a fiscal sponsor of a community not far from Zuni, actually, Raymond Navajo region, with a feasibility study. So they worked on a feasibility study for a grocery store that does exist there now, thanks to rural development. And years previous to that, we actually were the sponsor of a co-op, basically refrigerated truck for produce, for moving produce and meats around the region, actually. So it was a Colorado, New Mexico initiative.
Right.
A couple of examples.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
Susan Wilger. I'm with the National Center for Frontier Communities. One thing that we do working in Frontier nationwide is help support the capacity of nonprofit organizations. We did apply for a rural business development loan, and we were told by USDA that nonprofit organizations are not recognized as businesses or corporations. So I challenge the federal government to look at that rule, because our nonprofit organizations are such a life force for our rural communities.
Absolutely. Thank you for that comment.
Hi, Suzanne Mickelson with Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. We're based in Denver and serve Colorado, Wyoming, and New Mexico. And we are very grateful for USDA for many of your programs, both loan and grant programs that we have used to assist our clientele in our cooperative development center and our rural economic development efforts, as well as our renewable energy work around the three states. I won't go into details because there's too many projects to mention.
Thank you. Thank you. Over here, right there.
Miriam Gillow-Wiles with the Southwest Colorado Council of Governments. We currently have a USDA technical assistance grant with San Juan County, New Mexico, and Mr. Trujillo to look at economic development with technology. And we'll be kicking that off later this month.
Fantastic. Thank you. Right over here.
Good afternoon. Annette Lebo with the Office of Governor Kate Brown in Oregon. So we have infrastructure funding programs at the state level. We have massive wastewater and water system needs. And whenever we have a rural community that has those needs, we have one-stop meetings where U.S. Rural Development is there along with the state agencies, and we're able to run through the different scenarios and come up with the most attractive funding scenario for that community. So we have quite a few water and wastewater projects in our state where
Fantastic.
USDA Rural Development is a key partner.
Thank you. Thank you.
I love the one-stop.
The one-stop.
The secretary would love that. He loves customer service.
Oh,
so
he does.
One-stop would be great.
Absolutely. We can do this some more, but let me. Okay, absolutely. Go ahead.
Thank you. Arvin Trujillo with the Four Corners Economic Development. A couple areas. One is, as Miriam indicated, we're in partnership with Southwest COG to move forward with broadband development in the region. Also, we were able to get a grant for 6 chapters a couple years ago, looking at what we call the 6-chapter economic opportunity effort to bring awareness and training to 6 chapters on how to begin to look at economic development and how to begin to develop their particular communities towards diversification as well as opportunities for them. One thing though I'd like to bring up, especially being from the Four Corners area, is we need to really begin to look at how do we work on developing a process by which we can look at funding in a coordinated effort. The Four Corners region is a region unto itself. The 4 states, we don't recognize the boundaries between the 4 states in that area. We work through, but let's take, I could go with USDA in terms of the Farm Service on how that area is all cut up in different areas and you got different regions. EDA, the same way, you got to deal with Denver, you got to deal with Austin, and you got to deal with Seattle, Washington, in order to coordinate funding and development there in the Four Corners area. So that's one thing that we need to really take a look at in our particular area.
Arvin, that's a great comment. And we do coordinate with Sally Clark up in Colorado, who is our state director, Randy Parker over in Utah, who is a great state director, and Jack Smith over in Arizona. And maybe that's a discussion we need to get all of us, the 4 of us, together with you and look at that, because that's a great idea. It's a great idea. Let me just make a plug here, a commercial announcement. We have brought, if you look at these 2 handsome, distinguished gray-haired gentlemen here, give us the wave, please. Thank you. Okay. They have a Together America Prospers guide to all of the programs that USDA Rural Development offers. We offer so many programs, it's hard to keep in memory. I believe we have 52 programs within our agency. And this is a guide that is a play-by-play, if you will. It tells you what program it is, who qualifies. It also tells you when you're 66 years old, glasses help. You know, what population qualifies, if you can get loan, grant, terms and conditions, all about our programs. It has it in this guide. These gentlemen will have one available for you. Take one of these, and one of these days, when I was a kid, Sears used to be just up the street here, and I'd run and get a Sears catalog with all the toys. Does anybody remember that? Okay, yeah, and I'd have it earmarked, you know, with all the stuff I want. Do the same. Consider this your Christmas Sears catalog. Go through it, let your imagination run wild, and then start talking to us at Rural Development, because we want to, as Jim said, I think I remember most, make things happen in rural America.
Right. Well, I was surprised to learn how many people had been into a RD office. I recently learned about RD and the expanse of offerings, and Sally Clark has been to our office. And so I appreciate everybody sharing their stories. I'd be interested in learning whether, because it's so expansive, whether the people find, whether your clients, your customers find it manageable, whether it's they have the local capacity to fully participate in those programs, whether they're easy to navigate. But I have a question for Rebeckah. So the report, what a tremendous amount of work that was in a short period of time. What implications will that have for policy? And let's start with with federal policy. There's so much that you can do without statutory authorization. I don't know if it had statutory recommendations, but when I start thinking about how broken the federal legislature is, I think about states. Does it have implications for states? Are there opportunities? Does it open up opportunities for richer partnerships with states where things are really happening?
I should hope so, yes. That's an absolute yes. And we keep looking for more of those opportunities. So it is the task and obligation of each of the federal agencies to take that report and use it as a platform. Not wait for USDA to always be in the lead, but for them individually to be acting and doing things to address concerns in rural America. And I'm just going to spitball and give you a few examples of things, and some of these we didn't see coming, but that other people outside and missions departments outside of USDA have done, and some that we've done things in partnership with. There's been a lot of work at the Department of Interior, working with other agencies, with USDA, but specifically the Department of Interior, to refine and revise some of the ways in which they operate. The president last fall released a executive order on Western waters, which was specifically intended and focused on addressing the very unique concerns relating to water in the West, and that it is such a precious commodity, and there is controversy, and there are challenges, and there's more the federal government can do, especially in the spaces and places where we have control over some of that water. And so that's led to some issues, especially RD has done a couple of very large projects, one specifically in California, and I think open to others as well. But that was a watershed moment for us to invest so heavily in something that affected such a substantial portion of what we forget, California being very rural. We have just today announced a Memorandum of Understanding with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which will allow multiple things to sort of breaking down some silos there in the relationship between the work that either RD or FSA does with tribes and with the American Indian and Native American community, and to streamline and try to provide better customer service there jointly and individually. Some more to follow on that, but literally that was just announced and signed today. There has been, this is going to sound odd, but it is uniquely situated in rural America. The Department of Justice has made a tremendous effort and initiative, and I sit on the council representing the Secretary for work on elder care and elder abuse. Certainly it is no secret that a substantial portion of rural America is aging, and what we're doing about, and not just aging, but aging and isolated, often with their children or their grandchildren not residing near them anymore, unfortunately, in some circumstances, and the abuses and taking advantage of either economically or otherwise that can occur from that. So the Department of Justice is engaged there and has several initiatives. RD is very active in that. The federal government, our federal partners and agencies, Small Business Administration, the Consumer CBPA, the folks that are consumer protection focused, come to us and often push you. If you go into a local USDA office, which we have one in almost every county, or very close there too in the United States, no single agency has probably a bigger footprint than USDA, particularly in rural America. And so you will begin to see a lot more materials, a lot more availability and access to information, not just from USDA, but hopefully also from other federal agencies about opportunities, projects, promotions, things that other departments in the federal government can offer to rural America and to those customers that walk in the door that might not even have a clue that, you know, Treasury has this program and opportunity that could help protect your grandmother, or that there's a lot of consumer-facing information that could be used to educate your teenagers and young people on personal finances and information on how to better service the tribal communities. Those are just a few of the immediate TikToks I can think of, and those are more recent, but there have been multiples across the board, you know, outside of the USDA that everybody is trying to multiple people called me and say, who is it I call at the White House to tell them what we're doing about rural America, because they all want to get their credit, up the food chain.
Right.
So.
Well, I think that of all the panels I've ever moderated, this might be my favorite because it moderated itself. I really want to thank everybody for your participation, for your engagement, but I particularly want to thank Rebeckah and Art. Thank you so much.
Good job.
And we're going to take a 10-minute break before our next conversation. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Rebeckah. You killed it. That was really good. Art.